and channels and connecting with those audiences. So we're not just thinking about you as the individual who's going to be taking strategic responsibility and the responsibility for posting and creating content all the time. Okay, so this is, I'm not going to talk about this in too much detail, but what I'd like you to do from today is, as we're going and you're taking notes, is thinking about what is the practical thing that I'm going to do, what's the change that I'm actually going to make. I ran a really short session for Save the Children Scotland recently, and these were kind of 12 recommendations that came out of that session, and some of it's really simple stuff. So things like number 3, put a strong focus on raising the profile of the new head of Scotland. They had some really simple things like 1 audio or video human story from each major project or service before summer 2020, making better use of the Google AdWords grant. So really from today, thinking about what are the actionable things that you can go away and do. It doesn't need to be a list of 12, it might just be 3 simple things, but we'll come back to that one at the end. So here's where things get a bit more interesting, and either it's all going to break and go horribly wrong, or it'll be totally fine. It will be totally fine. Jen's looking like, yeah, it'll be totally fine.
It will be totally fine.
Totally fine. So we're going to use a combination of breakout rooms and Google Jamboards. And basically, we're going to break you up into groups. And in those groups, what I'd like you to be thinking about is, what are the big things that you want to discuss today? So what are the big social media opportunities, but what are the issues facing your organisation? So I want you to think about channels, audiences, content, purpose, time, any concerns that you've got. So this is your chance to learn from other people in your group, but also we're going to document a couple of these things as well. So I'm going to show you very quickly what a Jamboard looks like. If you've got the slides link open, you can click where it says Jamboard breakout time, but Jen will also put the Jamboard link in the chat just now, so you can click that and you can open the Jamboard up. So lots of you on the Jamboard at the moment. Don't do anything in the Jamboard right now. When you go into your breakout rooms, I want each of you to take a Jamboard, and when I say take a Jamboard, there's 20 different Jamboards, and using this little arrow at the top, you can click between them. So if someone has already started adding content to Jamboard, you need to move on to the next Jamboard for your breakout group. And I've kind of started to categorize it for you. You don't have to use it this way if you don't want to. So audiences, channels, content, logistics, other. And then the simplest way of doing it is when you click the little sticky note icon down the bottom, you can start adding sticky notes and you can color code them corresponding to what it's going to be. We're going to give people 10 minutes for this task. There's no right and wrong way of doing this. So it's up to you in your group, in your small group, how you want to do it, as long as you've each got your own Jamboard. And then we'll get you all back in 10 minutes. Now, this is the point where I stop sharing the screen. Hopefully you've all got the Jamboard open. I try and put you in breakout rooms and hopefully don't fail miserably at this as well. Right, so there's 65 of you. So if I put you into 10 rooms, that'll give you 6 to 7 participants per room. So we're going to go into Jamboards, and that we're going to bring you back in 10 minutes time. So enjoy your discussions. I'm going to share screen and we'll get the Jamboards up. Most of you have come back. There's a couple of people in the waiting room. So I'll share this just now. So hopefully that worked for most of you. Don't worry too much if you didn't get a chance to put lots and lots of stuff on your board, or if it went horribly wrong at your end, or it's more about the conversation that you're having. So I'm going to have a look at a couple of the boards and we'll see what kind of stuff has come up. So logistics on this first board, only person on the digital team. So that is a big issue, and it's probably an issue that lots of you are facing. So again, from today, I want you to be thinking about, what do those logistics look like, and how do you manage stuff? How do you delegate that responsibility around people? Intimidated by some channels, TikTok in particular. Is anyone in the room using TikTok in their organisation?
No.
Jen, is there anyone? Oh, Richard, do you want to tell everyone how you're using TikTok?
Yeah, so we've only really, it was kind of one of our isolation commitments, is we wanted to get on TikTok, and we've had a lot of success with it. We're mostly using it to try and reach a younger bracket, because we found that Twitter, we were aiming more towards professionals, Facebook was families, and we had a youth bracket that we weren't connecting with as much. So that's what we've been using TikTok for. It's one of those ones where it looks deceptively simple, and then the actual videos take so much time to prepare. But yeah, no, in our first one, we got about 2,000 to 3,000 likes in the first few hours, which we were absolutely blown away by. And but yeah, it's it's got a bit of a learning curve, and it's one of those ones where the professionalism you see in graphics on Twitter and Facebook that's expected, almost you have the inverse on TikTok. We found that if it's too slick, people don't seem to like it. They like it looking a bit kind of homemade. So yeah, my colleague Megan's and I have been leading it. She's on the call as well, and we've had some learning experiences, but it's going okay.
Okay. I had a session at Young Scott maybe about 5 months ago. I don't know. I've lost track of time because of lockdown. And we had a panel of young people on that who basically charities could ask any question they wanted about TikTok. And like some of the things that just kept coming up time and time again was that notion of content being satisfying, which is a really hard thing to quantify, but like what none of them wants is any messaging from any charity ever. And how you do that in a meaningful way is quite interesting. But like the example you gave about, you know, hitting a whole load of people with your first post is exactly, so Glasgow Uni, where came along, gave a talk on it, and they've been starting to experiment a bit with TikTok. And one of the things that struck them was having an account with basically no followers. I think their first post hit something like 40 or 60,000 people. And it's just the way that the algorithm works in TikTok is very different from pretty much every channel. And the fact that it's recommending things to people and testing stuff out really quickly means you can hit a broad range of people fairly quickly without necessarily having the kind of core audience of followers or likes that you'd have on another channel. The one thing I would say, and you kind of hit the nail on the head, Richard, is the idea that you can take your strategy and content from Facebook or Twitter and dump it on TikTok, which we saw a lot of charities do with Snapchat in particular, is just, it's not going to work. So you're really going to need to think about what that content looks like. We're going to look at one of the examples actually come in the slides is if you're working with young people, how do you empower them to take over those TikTok accounts, and how do you empower them to create that content rather than a bunch of people my age in an office going, what do young people like? I think I'll create content that's going to strike a chord with people half my age, which is kind of ridiculous, quite frankly. Okay, right, let's go back to the boards. I will need to make this screen minimal. There we go. Right. Where is it? There's one of these boards that I particularly liked. Oh, it's gone. There was one of the boards that just had in massive letters across the front of it, taken. And I loved that someone had like squatted on a board and didn't want anyone else. And that's all I had for a very long time. I don't know who you are, but you're amazing, whoever this person was. Right. So here is one of our other boards. So content, avoid saturation or dilution, learning what's more important than others to post. So just a simple rule of thumb is before you put a post on any channel is asking yourself, would this content be either useful or interesting to that end audience? If the content is simply advertorial for a thing you are doing in your organization and is neither useful or interesting to your members or the parents who are your beneficiaries or the young people you want to connect with, don't put the post up. So it's a really simple rule of thumb for content you're going to be putting on any of these channels. Right, let's have a wee scroll through, see what other ones have got. I particularly like this kind of chimney approach that this person takes. That is quite a phallic looking Google Jamboard, I have to admit. That is quite worrying. Right, there's just basically all about fundraising, but that's okay. Okay, what other ones have we got? Right, so logistics, deciding who's responsible, language limitations. Has anyone in the group, so anyone in the cohort at the moment, has anyone made any kind of deliberate decisions about logistics in terms of how you've spread responsibility across your team? So things like allocating days of the week to people, or any other ways that you spread it across a team of people who maybe are not a digital team?
We have 3 volunteers doing our social media, and we, at first they were all doing a little bit of everything, but we decided to split it off that one person takes responsibility for Twitter, one person does Facebook, one person does Instagram, based on their experience, and it was really interesting. We just had a discussion about it, and it turned out we had 3 volunteers who were all better at one platform than the other, and so it worked really well. But obviously that could change if the volunteer team changes. But that's how we've done it so far, because we don't have a dedicated comms person. So before that, it was myself trying to scrabble 5 minutes here and there to put stuff on. Yeah,
and that's just a really good piece of advice, and it seems an obvious one, but playing to people's strengths. And we see a lot of the time what happens is in charities where they don't have a dedicated comms team, where people are expected to get their head around 5 or 6 different platforms or types of content, and everyone understands how everything works. Whereas actually you might, so a classic one, I had someone in a workshop who had an admin, member of the admin team who filmed her son's football matches at the weekend. And actually she got a bit of support and a bit of leeway in terms of her working day. And she actually created a lot of the video content in the organisation. She didn't sit in a comms team. She was the only person who knew how to shoot video and edit video simply. And that became part of her job. So it's really thinking about how do you play to people's strengths. If you've got a board member who's an expert in a specific area, but the idea of them tweeting is quite frankly terrifying, maybe they can go and write guest blog content elsewhere, or guest video content and thought leadership content elsewhere. So really starting to think a bit more about how you play to people's strengths. Right, let's go through some more of these boards, see what else we've got. This is a nice looking board. Resources versus return, really good point. This is an interesting one actually, this notion of resources versus return, and particularly on Facebook, where we're seeing kind of dwindle in return for the amount of effort that you put into those organic posts. Can I get a quick show of hands for people who kind of feel that their organic reach has plummeted over the last year on Facebook? Yeah, quite a lot of people. What I've seen a lot of charities doing now, and I certainly wouldn't dissuade anyone from doing it, is actually starting to use their Facebook page when they've got a very limited resource, primarily as a way of delivering targeted ads to people. So they post very, very little organic content because they're posting every single day, taking loads of time to create content, they're putting up and it's reaching 20 people. Whereas actually they could post once a fortnight, and rather than spending all that time, they put a bit of budget behind the targeted ad that's going to drive fundraising or volunteer recruitment or service referrals. And starting to potentially in your organisation where there's that limited resource is thinking about Facebook as a delivery tool for advertising, rather than thinking about a place where you kind of slavishly put organic content all the time. And that's not going to work for everyone, but it's something you might want to think about. Okay, this is a very black, this is like the goth board. They just refuse to put anything. I like this, this is good. This one is erratic, but excellent. Okay, I'm going to have to do that quite a lot to read some of these ones. Okay, how do you make content engaging? So we're going to look at some content examples, and it'd be good to pull out some examples in the room. How to work out which ones audiences want to use and which is most relevant to a particular audience. So we're going to do a wee task in a second, helping you think about who your audience is and what they want. And this is probably the simplest single thing that you can do, is really starting to think about what are we looking to achieve. So what is that organizational objective that we're looking to achieve through this content that we're creating in these channels, and who is that person that we're adding value to. So when I come and put that post up and I'm thinking, is this going to be useful or interesting to that person? Who is that person and how are we helping them in their life today? Okay, what other boards have we got? How to reach different demographics, how to create a full campaign. Difficulty with technical skills. If you click on the Facebook tab in particular, in the pinboard link that I gave at the start, there's a really good video walkthrough of using Facebook Insights, and it's a 15-minute video, and it talks you through every single element of Facebook Insights, which is really useful, so that's worth looking at. Okay, what other boards have we got? I think we're maybe at the end. Oh, look at this one. Here's one of the boards that just had taken scrawled all over it. I love it. Sticking your flag down. Okay. How do you deal with uninteresting content that you're obliged to post? There is the biggest issue that lots of people who work in charities face. Joe, I'm going to pick on you because I'm conscious that you've worked in some big national charities before, and you have probably been bombarded with all sorts of shite that you've been asked to post over the years. How have you dealt with that particular issue?
I think that when you feel you can say no, you have to say no, but I think there are situations where you just have to post it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
No, that's not a very helpful answer.
No,
if you can make an argument for getting rid of it, then do that.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. There'll be times when your chairperson or chief exec's asked to do something, the chances of you saying no are quite minimal. One of the things that can help with that is having some kind of simple playbook that shows people what good content looks like. So having 3 examples of here's Instagram posts that either we've put up or another organisation's put up that performed incredibly well. When you give me that Instagram post in an email, what I don't want from you is a PDF flyer. Please make this into an Instagram post. What you need to deliver me is something that looks 85 to 90% like the thing that's in the playbook. If you don't do that, it gets sent back to you until it does. And so people are delivering you content that is almost finished and you're just making those tweaks at the end, rather than you having to take something that is essentially junk and not fit for purpose, and you're maybe having to spend half a day to even get it to the point where it's fit for going up on that channel. But Joe's right.
A sneaky way around that, by the way.
I'll go for it, right? What's your sneaky top tip, Stephen?
I quite often get handed, like, somebody will hand me an 8-page Word document and say share on social media. What I do is I make a PDF out of that, stick it on Google Drive, and then make one wee media burst and say, come and find out about this. You can download the information here. So you just put one wee post out and it keeps everybody happy because there are 8-page documents available, but your social media is not covered in text.
Yeah, that's a pretty good tip. Yeah, I used to have one a slide that was just, it was like the classic thing of please make this a post, and you see like things that are clearly posters that are meant to be put up in a church hall, and that is just someone's Facebook feed. So Facebook's algorithm is clever enough to know how much text is on a graphic or on an image, and will penalise you really heavily if you have I mean, from an accessibility point of view, it's a really terrible thing to do. But just in terms of content, if it comes on a device that size and you've created a thing that's laden with text, I'm not going to be able to read it. So just thinking about educating staff that you're working with in terms of what good content looks like. I think that might be the last one. There's a couple other roads here. So we'll talk a wee bit about channels. There'll be questions for that, opportunity for questions in terms of that kind of stuff. I think that is all the boards. Hopefully you found using Google Jamboard useful. I personally think it's the easiest tool for that type of activity. So there's things like Miro that you can use as well. Miro is really good because it's got much more functionality than Google Jamboard. The problem with Miro is if you've never used it before, it's a bit of a steep learning curve to just be chucked into it. Right, I'm going to go back to the slides just now. This is the point where I also realise that my controls are over the bit where I want to get my slides to. Very professional here. So, okie doke. So our first thing, let's get back to basics. I spoke a wee bit about this already. So thinking about that organisational goal you've got and putting that front and centre when you're thinking about creating content and when you're thinking about managing these channels. So what we're talking about here, again, is possibly not for the people in this room, but people across the organisation and helping them understand what social media is actually for. So we're talking about moving away from waffly statements like, I want to raise awareness of my charity. So when your chief exec is understanding what social media is for, they should be understanding that it's about driving fundraising. It's about us increasing downloads for that research paper that we've put up on the site. It's us about shamelessly harassing MSPs, MPs and councillors on Twitter so that we can increase visits to our local services by 10% in 2020. So what I'm going to do very, very quickly is I'd like you all to use the chat box, and I'd like you to put in one thing that you're looking to achieve with your social media in 2020. There's only one rule: nobody is allowed to use the statement raising awareness. We will take it as a given. You want people to know your charity exists. But is there one tangible thing you're looking to do with social media? So it could be about volunteer recruitment, it could be about fundraising, it could be about getting people to read more of your research, it could be about busting myths on a specific health condition. But what is that one thing you're looking for people to do with your social media? Okay, so if you want to type it, stick it in the chat box and we'll see what you come up with. Okay, making policy change. Changing the narrative on the future of food and farming. Love it. Okay. Okay. Recruitment for foster care. Increasing referrals to the service, especially for young carers. Fundraising, behaviour change, getting more people cycling. Okay, increasing the number of people lobbying their MPs for drug law reform. That's really specific. Okay, some amazing stuff coming through there. Okay, highlighting the range and diversity of careers paths. Okay, increasing referrals have just become Scotland-wide. Okay. Does anyone want to share, particularly that stuff around referrals or recruitment, does anyone want to talk a wee bit about how they're measuring that? So specifically, if one of your targets is to increase referrals for a service, how you measure that through your presence on social media, or if you're using it as a volunteer recruitment tool, how have you been measuring the time you're spending on social media and the impact it's having on that organisational objective? Anyone want to share any thoughts on that? Give us a show of hands if you do. Some of you don't have video on, so you're probably not going to show hands, but you can use the wee emoji icon. So what I'm taking from that is nobody is measuring anything that they do online. So there's a thing that you all need to be doing. Either that or you're all incredibly shy. Someone just unmuted, so I don't know. Louise, did you intentionally unmute, or are you going to share something?
No, it was unmuted, sorry, but no, measurement's a definite missing. It's so intangible, isn't it? And especially when you've got a small team with not necessarily the skills in this area, it's very, very difficult.
Okay. So some of the ways, Jane, do you want to jump in?
It's not from the current place I work in, but I would say that when I worked in connecting schools with an outdoor learning service and was looking for referrals there, we actually developed a whole kind of customer journey around it. And so that enabled us, using the analytics, to actually measure how far people got down that process and whether they actually then converted into booking sessions with us. But I mean, that was my entire job. So yeah, it does take a lot of effort, and I do understand if people haven't got around to doing it.
Yeah, and you can do it in sometimes quite manual ways if you're not comfortable with something like Google Analytics, and it could literally be as simple as the volunteer recruitment form that you've got on your website. I say the volunteer recruitment form you've got on your website, but 70% of charities still have some crap Word document I need to download and then fill out and then email to someone. But well, that's a whole discussion for another day. But having on that drop-down form, how did you hear about this opportunity, and having specific channels on it. But it's fairly simple in Google Analytics to track where did that person come from, and you now know that if you spent 2 weeks of hard work on a campaign on Instagram, did it drive more younger people coming to that volunteer recruitment form? So starting to use these in a much more clever way. Without doing that, the danger is you're piling a lot of effort and time and potentially money into content without knowing how it ties into that organisational objective. Okay, right, I'm going to go back to the slides again and just talk a wee bit about audiences. So this is a really simple framework which is tried and tested and used a lot in the service design sector. And it specifically comes from Sarah Richards' content design book, which is amazing. There's a link to some of her slides in that slides deck as well there, which you can go and have a look at. But just this notion of creating really simple user job or behavior stories to help design effective content. Now, personas are good. Personas can be often very, very convoluted, and you end up making a fake person who's the person you're trying to target without really getting into the thinking of how do you add value to that person on those networks. So this particular technique is more used around website content, but you can equally apply it to content in your social media channels as well. So as a person in a particular role, I want to perform an action or find something out so that I can achieve my goal of. So it could be, as a new dad, I want to better understand what my rights are for paternity leave so that I can spend more time with my children. And then you can think about how does the content for our parent and charity on our website help support new dads to understand that, and how is the content on our social media channels going to reinforce it? So how are we adding value to that person? And what's really interesting though is going beyond these personas and thinking about behaviours. If you click that second link, Co-op have written a really good blog post about this in the last week. And this is this notion that people will come to you at different points in their life depending on what they need for you. So I used to work for Relationship Scotland, which was equivalent of Relate in Scotland, and people would come when there were big life events. So I'm a parent who's recently gone through a divorce and I need to make formal contact arrangements with my children. How do I get support to do that without accessing a solicitor? So we're thinking about what are those behaviours and life events where we support people, and how does our content on social media and our website help them do the thing that they need to do. So starting to think about social media not just in marketing terms, but also in quite practical terms around what your charity is set up to do in the first place. Right, I'm going to go through just some content examples. Just remember, you've got the chat box, and if you want to ask any questions, put them in there. Jen will be there to pick up some of those, and I'll pick up some of those once we get through these slides. So this first one, really obvious one, you probably all know this, but I think it's worth reinforcing when we're particularly thinking about how do we get a broader staff team to understand what good content is and what we're expecting them to deliver to us. So real human stories always beat corporate comms. So when you look at the NHS blood donations page on Facebook, it's probably one of the most used NHS Facebook pages. It kind of breaks the mold of most public sector health pages, which are very boring, one-way communication, very sterile corporate comms. The content on that page that beats all the expensive polished video content is basically real human stories that have been taken, usually on a squint camera phone, and have been shared with the page. So this one here is this little girl, Amber, and it's her mum had submitted this to the page, talking about the blood transfusion she got and how it saved her life, and a photograph of her in the hospital. And you can see some of the stats, and that's that post had 879 shares, 3.7 thousand reactions, 331 comments. You can go on the NHS Blood Donations page any day of the week, and there'll be user submitted content like this. Now, I spoke at the NHS Comms conference at Murrayfield maybe about 8 or 9 months ago. The person who manages the page was in the room and basically was saying that as they started to post these, what happened was more and more people got in touch via Facebook Messenger and were submitting their own photos and their own stories. And actually they're now at a point where they have to wade through lots and lots of good content, and they've got this luxury of being able to pick and choose the ones that are going to really work for them. So the more you do this stuff, the more likely it's going to come through your organisation or come from your service users. Takeovers give authenticity to your social media channels. So we kind of spoke a bit about that when we're talking about TikTok. For me, this works really well on Instagram. So the Young Women Scot account, or the YWCA in Scotland, are really good at this. So rather than thinking about how do we as a team of charity professionals talk about the issues that are important to young women, why don't we allow young women to take over the account and talk about the things that are important to them in a language that suits them. So this is just one example. They have takeovers every couple of weeks. So this is 2 young women talking about the Scotland-Zambia partnership, so talking about international development and mental health, and they allow them to use the stories functionality to take over the account during that period. They've got some safeguarding in place to do that, so they have like pre-approval of posts, so it's not a complete free-for-all when they do that. What I would say is if you're interested in that and how that works, go and connect with the YWCA on Twitter or on Instagram. They're really amenable to answering any questions about the approaches that they've taken. Right, number 5. Recruit and empower social media champions to make the most of their personal network. So you can do this at quite a large scale, but also thinking about doing this at quite a small scale. So this is an example from Cancer Research UK. And what they have is they have a closed network of people who will post on their own channels. Now, what this isn't is Cancer Research UK in that closed network of social media champions or brand ambassadors or whatever you want to call them. It's not about Cancer Research putting a post up and saying, we'd love it if you just talked about this thing. They will give people pre-made content, so they'll give them a pre-made video that's pre-sized for Instagram and the text that should accompany it. They'll give them the tweet that they should be putting up and the hashtags that are relevant to it. So they're giving people a range of content around campaigns and allowing those people to choose the platform they want to talk about it. So they've got a few thousand people in that network now. Now, I've seen some really small charities take this approach, and what they'll do is they'll set up a closed WhatsApp group, and in that closed WhatsApp group, they'll have some really kind of core supporters. They'll post a piece of content, so it could be a fundraising ask, and ask those core supporters to go and then post that on their own personal channels. So for a lot of charities, this is a really simple way of gaming the system of those algorithms. And Facebook in particular, if you can get those individual people to be putting it on their own channels, their own accounts, you're much more likely to broaden the reach out for your content. Remember, an average person on Facebook has about 250 friends. Some people have many, many more than that. If you have 10 people in that closed network and they immediately all put it to their own networks, and then someone in that network hits that share button, you can see how that stuff can snowball really, really quickly. Another really simple way that you can do this, I've seen some charities doing this specifically with their board. So lots of boards want to help with social media presence. Some of your board members will have a big presence on LinkedIn and on Twitter. They are probably people who are well known in their networks. If you can give them content on a plate that they can share on Twitter and LinkedIn, and either do that through a Slack channel or Teams or a closed WhatsApp group or even an email, it's very, very easy to tap into those networks of people, and particularly works well for fundraising asks. Okay, I'm going to go through some more content examples and we'll open back up for discussion. So number 6, combine channels effectively, follow up effectively. This is a really nice example from Stephen Robertson, who's the chief, or was the chief executive of Big Issue Foundation. I don't actually know if he is still the chief executive of Big Issue Foundation. So he put a fundraising ask up on LinkedIn. So he does a thing every single year called the Big London Night Walk, which is a 20-kilometre walk through the middle of the night in London. About 300 people take part. And every year he does it, he puts it on Twitter and on LinkedIn, a photograph of him doing it the year before, and then talking a wee bit about why he wants to raise money for the Big Issue Foundation, and then a link to his Virgin Money page asking for money. So he put this up, he put a post up on LinkedIn. I hit the like button on the post, loads of people were liking it, leaving comments wishing him well, hitting the share button and sharing it amongst their own networks. So I hit like. About 10 minutes later, this message dropped into my inbox on LinkedIn, and basically saying, "Hi Ross, thanks for liking a post. Our marketing budget is zero, so it really helps spread the Big Issue word. A wee bit more about why he's doing it, and that link to that Virgin Money page again." So I clicked the link and I gave Stephen £30 and I sponsored him for his London night walk. When I clicked the refresh button on that Virgin Money page, that totalizer kept going up and up and up. It went up by £10, £20, £40, £100. So I went back to Stephen and I said, "I've donated £30. I want to ask you a question now. Do you just send that same message to every single person who interacts with the post?" And he came back and said yes. So that message that you're saying there, "Hi Ross" becomes "Hi Sandra" becomes "Hi John." And all he's doing is basically copy and pasting that message. But the point at which someone gives the money is not the post that he put on LinkedIn. The point at which someone gives the money is the point at which Stephen sends that personal message. So that personal ask from the chief exec direct to that person. And the fact that you've liked or shared or commented on that original post is a signal that you're warm to taking part and to potentially sponsor them and supporting the organisation. So when you're thinking about how you do this and how you spread responsibility, it'd be good if you could think about how do we involve our chief exec and how do we involve board members, and this type of approach can work really, really well. Again, if there's any questions about any of this stuff, just ping it in the chat, we'll pick it up shortly. Okay, this is a really obvious one. I think this is one of the biggest mistricks in the charity sector. I'd be really interested if anyone's got examples of how they've done this. If you could put your quick examples in the chat box, that'd be really useful for other people. So just this notion of going to where your audiences are, which seems really, really obvious, but so underused. And the idea behind this is really, rather than setting up camp on a specific account, so you've set up your Facebook page and you laboriously post content there every day, and you have 2,000 likes the last 2 years, but you're noticing that every time you post now, you maybe hit 20 people. If you know that your audience exists somewhere, so it could be in a closed Facebook group, it could be in a WhatsApp group, it could be that it's people who are teachers who subscribe to a specific newsletter. If you know your audience is somewhere already, you need to go to where that audience is. So this example from Leslie, who's a housing officer at Yarlton Housing Group, they took a big decision as a housing association to stop just posting stuff on their own organisational Facebook page, but actually starting to go out to where their audiences are in the communities they support. So this screenshot is from a closed group called Yarlington Chat, which is managed by local people. It's got about 9,000 of the tenants who live in Yarlton Housing Association's homes. So when Leslie comes to ask a question, so it's not a very exciting question, it's about electricity smart monitors. When she posts that in that group, as you can see there's 198 responses to that. She would not have got the same number of responses if that had just been a single one-way post on the organisational Facebook page. That works because she's going to where that audience is. Okay, number 8, a good review is worth 100 posts. I have no way of quantifying this. This is just complete hyperbole. But what I'd like you to think about is where do reviews help people understand what your organisation does and the impact that you have, regardless of what your organisation is. So whether you provide a frontline service, whether you're a member-led organisation, whether you're a campaigning organisation, every single charity should be using reviews as a way of driving that relevant traffic that you want to get and to convert people as supporters or volunteers or beneficiaries who are going to access your services. So 2 quick examples and 2 thoughts on where you might want to put some of these reviews. So Jackie Taylor, who's Chief Exec of Lifelink, this is a shameless screenshot from a recommendation Jackie put on my LinkedIn profile. Now what that means is if I come to message a charity chief exec on LinkedIn and they've never heard of me before, and I said, I heard from a contact that you were looking to run a social media session with your staff, it might be good to have a chat about that. The first thing they're going to do is look at my profile. If they look at my profile and there's a review like that from Jackie, it makes it much easier for them to have trust and to potentially reply to that message. If they look at my profile and there is no mention from any other charity chief exec of the work that I've done, probably they won't even respond to that message. So the same thing applies to you, particularly if you're trying to connect with people who work maybe in local authorities or work in the health service. How do you build that trust that they should connect with you as a third sector professional? This one down the bottom, if you can see this one here from Peak. So I am a total fanboy of Peak, Glasgow-based charity. If you're looking for a charity that totally punches above its weight in using social media, Peak are the charity you go and look at. So they run loads of youth work sessions in Glasgow, predominantly based in the East End. They've also been doing loads of work to feed people during COVID-19. So they've supplied almost 200,000 hot meals to people across Glasgow. They have an excellent food truck with the amazing name, which is Pikachu, and it is a slightly knockoff Pokemon branded food truck. It is amazing. But this is a review. So if you go on their Facebook page, there's about 75-star reviews from ordinary parents whose kids use their services. This is one of the ones that I just kind of picked out because it kind of struck a chord with me. So Stephanie's talking about the fact that her son is deaf and he goes to Peak for a year now and he goes to the football, and the fact that staff have adapted that service so that her son can take part in that. So again, just thinking about if you're a teacher who's got a child in your classroom who's got additional support needs and you search for that and you find that review on Peak's Facebook page, it's very easy to know where you're going to refer more children to. So how do you build that level of trust? A couple other places you might want to think about reviews. So if you're a place-based, location-based service, so if you're something like an outdoor education centre, thinking about how TripAdvisor is going to be part of that reviews process for you. Every one of you probably has a Google business review. And what I see with a lot of charities, so if I'm going to run a workshop for a charity, the first thing I do is do a search in Google, and lo and behold, that's Housing Association I'm about to go and do a session with. It will be 3.7 on Google reviews, and it's basically because 3 disgruntled members of the public are the only people that have left reviews on their Google business listing. So with all of these things, what you want to do is close that feedback loop. So it's no coincidence that Peak has lots of 5-star reviews. And what they'll do is when someone like Stephanie phones up and says, it's amazing the difference that I've seen in my son, they will ask Stephanie to go and leave that review on Facebook so that other parents can understand the work they're doing. So when you get good feedback, encourage those people to leave it on the platform that's most appropriate for you. Okay, I'm going to finish up with one very quickly, and then we're going to do a wee chat and chance for questions. So this is, we were talking about takeovers before. This is a takeover. This is an actual takeover from the NHS. This was the first time they tried takeovers. So Bob is a consultant who works in a hospital or potentially worked in a hospital. Someone in the NHS gave Bob the login details for the Twitter account. So this is from the actual @NHS Twitter account, and said, Bob, we want to do more takeovers so people understand what staff across the NHS are doing in their personal lives and professional lives. Bob was like, that sounds great. Nobody at the NHS thought, how do we put a process in place so that we can look at some of these tweets before they go live? Nobody thought, we will tell Bob, here's what a good Twitter takeover looks like, and we'll give him some examples of content. So Bob, without spell checking his tweets, sent this tweet out. I still to this day have no idea if that is Bob's actual hobby or if it's a typo. I have no idea why Bob chose that particularly sinister alleyway as the photograph that he chose, but that was Bob's tweet. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen and stop just shouting at you, and we've got a chance for some questions. So don't be like Bob. That is the main thing that you should be thinking about. Right, any questions that have come in on the chat, and then we'll take some from video, Jen, because I've not looked at any of the chat because I've just been chatting at you.
Yeah, there was a couple of questions around the cancer research example of recruiting social media champions. So I'm not sure if either of the people who asked the questions want to come in and expand a bit more, but it was around measurement. How are they measuring the impact of recruiting the social media champions, and would they be likely to tag cancer research in every post? I'm not sure if, was it Lauren, I think, asked what maybe come in and speak about.
Lauren, do you want to jump in on your question?
Yeah, it was just like when you've got those social media champions and you're giving them content to post, like do they then, like how does it link to your charity if they're posting it on their personal accounts? Would they say that they're posting it on behalf of like cancer research, or I was just wondering how it ties into your own social media?
Yeah, I mean, well, cancer research, when they put them out, they give, so that it'll be for specific campaigns. So it could be a campaign that's an education campaign or a fundraising campaign or a call to action about writing to your MP about a specific thing. and then they tie it into a hashtag for every specific person that's going to use it. The only problem with that is by default on Facebook, everyone's account is locked down, which is where hashtags become slightly ridiculous on Facebook. So if I personally do that, and even if I use that hashtag and Cancer Research runs a search for that hashtag, they're not going to find my hashtag because it only went to my 570 friends on Facebook. So it's just keeping in mind, if you're doing this, that there needs to be an element of looseness to it and an element of trust. But what they're absolutely not doing is saying, here's a campaign, here's how we would talk about it, and here's the images we would use, but we trust you to talk about it in any way that you want and go and do whatever you want with an image. So when people sign up for that, they're very clear about, here are 2 or 3 images you can choose from, here's 2 or 3 types of messaging, and they're not letting people kind of go off on wild tangents when they're doing that. But you can do it at a really small scale. So their one was like a recruitment campaign that they ran, and then they've got a kind of closed cohort. I think they recruited a few thousand people, but it could literally be, you know, if you've got 10 supporters or volunteers who've got a good presence, then how do you empower them to talk about it? Because I think, I mean, like Jen, you volunteer for Refugee, and I think that Refugee have kind of done that in a really loose, relaxed way, where they've got supporters who share a lot of Refugee's content, and that's how Refugee has big reach online. Would you say is that?
Yeah, definitely. Selena, I'm sure she won't mind me saying, is very proud of the fact that she does no sort of analytics or anything like that whatsoever. But the thing about Refugee's content is it's so organic and what's the word I'm looking for? It provokes an emotional response in the people who are viewing it. So I think that's definitely a massive factor in why Refugee's social media is just fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, to give you an example of that, so they had a campaign maybe a year ago or 2 years ago around trying to get buggies and prams to refugees in Glasgow. And that campaign, so when you looked at the analytics and that campaign, it basically worked because the network of people who wanted to support Refugee and didn't necessarily have the money to donate something, but had a spare buggy in a shed somewhere, people felt a tangible thing they could do, and people shared it amongst their own groups very, very quickly. That post, that one post, which, like, and Selena probably won't mind me saying this, was literally, I mean, it's literally a picture of a buggy with the call to action on it. It wasn't the most exciting post. That post was seen by more people than live in the whole of Greater Glasgow with no budget behind it. So again, it's just thinking about what's the possibility by tapping into people's existing personal networks rather than thinking everything needs to be one-way traffic coming from your own channel.
And people remember it as well, because we don't do a lot of comms around the buggy appeal, but we still get offers of buggies all the time.
Yeah. Any other questions coming in? Any that you've noticed?
I think Jane had her hand up.
Oh, okay. Jane, do you want to jump in? Just unmute yourself.
I think you've actually answered it.
Okay.
I was kind of asking specifically about, like, you know, if you do have social ambassadors, whether you try and capture data from their, you know, capture analytics from their accounts, or whether you just have to take a looser approach. But I think you're probably saying just take a looser approach.
Yeah, so personally, I think if you've got limited resources, the analytics you should be capturing are, how does something result in a tangible, actionable thing happening? So how does the thing I put online result in 3 volunteers having signed up with us over the last quarter? Or how does the thing result in a 4% uplift in online giving? The danger is lots of people are so obsessed about reach and a whole slew of other metrics that they're spending more time measuring the metrics than they are creating the content and thinking about how they build a much better user experience to get someone to convert as a supporter or as a volunteer. And there's a really nice example. It was Battersea Dogs Home. So they had, like, I think it was a 4 or a 5-step donations process, and they chopped it to a single page. It kind of looks a bit clunky. So when you go on the page now, it's basically all the stuff got chopped by about maybe 30% in terms of the questions they asked, but they put every single question on a single page, and it was optimized for mobile. They saw 24% uplift in giving just by making it really simple, so that when I see that amazing video of a dog on Facebook and I click through to support you, I can do everything in a single action. So you need to really be thinking about not just what is the good content, but that end point of where I'm pushing someone to. If that experience isn't good enough, you can create the most amazing content in the world, but it's not going to have any impact because I've still got to jump through 5 pages on a mobile device, and I'm never going to get to that 5th step to convert as a supporter. Okay, right, where do we get to? So I've got a wee task. We're going to use some breakout rooms again. So I am going to share my screen. So we're going to go back to this, the recommendations for Save the Children. Now, what I'd like you to do is, from all the stuff that I've just kind of shouted at you about, and all the stuff that you discussed in your original breakout room, and probably some of the stuff that you're seeing come through chat, there's some really nice examples coming through the chat box I've noticed. What I'd like you to do in your groups this time is just have a very loose chat and have up to 3 things that you might change as a result of what we've talked about today. You can pinch some ideas from that slide, so things like, if we're going to use LinkedIn, we're going to stop using the company profile and we're going to empower the chief exec or the chairperson to use their network. We're going to set a definite target for guest blogging articles, and we're going to commit to doing 6 posts a year, which is not a big ask. Or maybe you're going to have a content calendar. You've known that you should have a content calendar for years, but you're going to put a content calendar in place. Or you're going to think about mapping out where your audience exists online and thinking much more cleverly about how you go to those audiences. So having a maximum of 3 things, it might just be 1 thing that you're going to do. I'm going to put you back into your breakout rooms. I want you to have a chat about that, and then we're going to come back. We're only going to take 5 minutes for this one. So I'll put you in your breakout rooms just now. Hi, Pasna. Pasna, you're on mute.
Muted.
You're still muted. Pasna, you're mute. You're on mute.
Oh.
I was just going to say that somebody was just answering my question there, and then I suddenly came to this call.
Oh no! Oh no! Were they halfway through answering it for you?
Yeah, I'm just seeing if I can see who it was.
Who was the person that was answering Pasna's question, and do you want to finish answering it? Can you find them?
Hello, it wasn't me, but they were answering it. They did answer it, and then you just disappeared. So, but they did have an answer for you. I think it was, you can always check the content yourself. You can always approve it before it's posted. That was the last thing that was said. So.
What was the question? Let's answer. Let's try and answer it for you. What was the question, Pasna?
Thank you. Thanks. I find it difficult to actually frame the question, so just bear with us. Basically, we've got a Weekday Wow Factor Facebook page, and I'm always posting content. And just from your examples, in respect to, was it Bob and the NHS post? Yes, not the greatest example, but I was just thinking about some of the older adults that I work with who could possibly take over the Facebook page at that time and post something about their experiences. Just wondering the logistics of how you do that.
Yeah, I mean, you can schedule stuff in the Facebook app itself and on the site. So you can just ask people to schedule stuff in future, and then you can pre-approve rather than, so basically you'd have in your kind of key principles of your policy, you just have something that states that nobody puts live content up immediately. Everything needs to be scheduled at least 24 hours in advance or 40 hours, whatever is appropriate for you. And then that means that you can then see that content and edit it or approve it or delete it if it's something like Bob's one, or change Bob's typo or whatever, or clarify if that's Bob's hobby, whatever you want to ask Bob. I've just put a link in the chat. I don't know if everyone can see it there. Just to the Oscar guide that we wrote. I mean, it's quite old now, so it's about 5 years old, but it's got just some key principles on developing a strategy, a policy, and content planning. So when we're thinking about today, and we're thinking about what are you going to do next, there are 3 simple documents that you should have in your organisation. So a strategy, just simply so that everyone knows how does this tie into organisational objectives. We're not talking about a big 14-page document. If you can keep it to a single page, it's more likely to be read and it's more likely to be updated regularly. A policy so that people are safe. So it covers things like the thing that Pasna just mentioned, a policy that says nobody posts live content other than Pasna, and anyone else who's on the channels must schedule stuff in 48 hours in advance, or whatever is going to be appropriate for you. In that Oscar guide, there's, I think, 8 key principles that should be in every social media policy. There's also some example policies in there as well. And then the final thing is a content calendar. Again, it's up to you and your organizations what that's going to look like. There's a really nice example in there about how you can use Trello as a content calendar. Trello is a really good way of a kind of content workflow, from taking stuff from ideas to going through an editorial process, to approving them, to then getting stuff live, and you can see stuff move through that editorial workflow. So Trello for me is probably the simplest way of doing it. So James just said, love Trello for content calendars. Really, really easy way of doing things. Okay, does anyone want to share one of the big changes either they're going to make or an interesting one they heard someone in the group talk about? Anyone want to share? I'm going to pick on someone. Alex, do you want to share one?
Right, hey everyone. So one of the things I suggested, or I think we'll take away, it was a social media takeover. In part because I'm the engagement officer at Haemophilia Scotland. So being a rare bleeding disorder, we are quite a small community. So in terms of our membership, we've only got a few hundred. And we're doing all right on social media. We've got about 2,800 followers on Facebook. But yeah, so to actually give our members an opportunity to take over our social media for a day. And in part, because we're a small, close-knit community, a lot of our members know each other anyway, but just to give them a platform to share stories, articles, photos, whatever that they might find inspiring, challenging, encouraging, that type of thing, or just to like raise awareness of maybe a challenge that they face or they've overcome that can benefit other people.
That's a brilliant idea. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. We had a health-based charity on one of the previous calls, and they were talking about using Facebook Live with healthcare professionals. So I can't remember the exact health condition, but it was quite a rare health condition. But kind of they've gone from being quite a small Scottish charity through COVID, putting much more effort into online channels, and actually I've seen they've grown like this big global audience. And one of the things that they've done that's worked really well is using Facebook Live, they've been able to put like world-leading experts in that specific rare condition in front of people, and people living with that condition can ask this world-leading physician questions about it, and doing that through Facebook Live, and it's worked really, really simply. So when we're thinking about content and thinking about where live content is going to fit in, but again, it ticks either that useful or that interesting box for people. There's a question just came in from Stuart there about good collaboration tools. Jen has already answered.
I'm being a Trello fan, sorry. Love Trello.
Yeah. And we've not talked too much about tools because this is a 90-minute session and we could talk about tools to the kind of end of time. Anyone to talk about, does anyone have a tool that they particularly love? So either in terms of social media management or content creation, anyone want to share one that's working really well for them? Richard, do you want to jump in? You got your hand up.
Yeah, we've been using Buffer, which is like Hootsuite, and it's free and it works really well. And one thing we do like about Buffer is, I know it's a weird thing to say, but on Instagram, the text is sometimes very fiddly to put in, and it's very difficult to put spaces in, and if you do have to put spaces in, you sometimes have to do the ... and then you can have your hashtags, and it just doesn't look great. Buffer removes all that, and it just will put the spaces in, so you don't have the ... So it looks clean, a lot easier.
Yeah, I really like Buffer. I think what's quite nice about Buffer is it's a much more stripped back experience. A lot of the platforms can be quite terrifying for people who are new to them, and they have a lot of functionality that, quite frankly, you'll probably never use, whereas Buffer's a much more stripped back experience. Canva, someone's going to shout out for Canva there as well. Canva's a really good tool. I've just had a child who's come in my room and who's, what's wrong? Yeah, it's a pop-up banner. She's excited about a pop-up banner. This is how excited. Ivy, do you want to come and say hello? Come and say hello. Right, if you're going to annoy me, you can at least say hello to people. There you go. Right. There you go. You want to wave? There we go. Woo. Right. There you go. Right, I'll be through in a minute, okay? Here we go. Scissors, excellent. So she's got scissors, so I can't control that now. So that seems safe, doesn't it? Excellent parenting here. Cool. Right, don't run with them. Okay. Canva, yep, another good tool. So some other ones just to give a shout out to. So Biteable. If people haven't used Biteable before, another good tool. Jen, any that kind of stand out for you that you love using?
I would stick in Canva, actually. Yeah.
Yep. There's one that I've started using during COVID for audio content called Zencaster, and that will allow you to have, so you can basically set up your channel on it, and then you can bring in another party. So you can use it as a podcasting tool, but you can also use it to create really quick audio-based content. So if you wanted to speak to a beneficiary about lived experience and you can't go and visit their house at the moment, you basically send them the link either via WhatsApp or Facebook or email. They click the link, it puts them into Zencastr. You then basically having a recorded audio conversation, and it creates 2 audio files. And then you can use that for podcast content or just a simple piece of audio that you can embed in your website. But it's a really, really simple, quick way of creating content. So that's a really nice tool. So Jen's put the link to that in there as well. So one of the things that I thought we might do just as a final thing before we finish up is I'd quite like if everyone can think about, is there a content role model that you have for your organisation? And I want you to put that in the chat. So is there an organisation that you look to and you think that's where we need to get to in terms of our content? Now, it doesn't need to be another charity. It could be a commercial organisation. It could be an individual who talks about something. Jen's just put Third Sector Lab. Thanks for that shameless promotion, Jen. So stick them in the chat and then we'll just see some of the examples that come through. So is there an organisation you look to and you think, I wish our content looked like that, or I wish our approach to social media looked like that? Megan said Young Scott. Yep, pretty amazing content creation. NSPCC. Jane said, I wish I knew one. So don't just think about your sector, but I think thinking about, it could be anything at all. It could be something commercial, but something you're looking to. Orkney Library, best, yeah, Orkney Library, amazing example. If someone can make a public library interesting and engaging and have more followers than live in the whole of the island of Orkney, they are doing something right. Kilt Walk, someone's dog ran out the door. Don't know if that's, they're chasing their dog. Excellent. Someone's talking about local cafes, innocent smoothies. Okay, so this is one of the big things when we're thinking about these principles and thinking about what can you do next, is having an agreed social media role model in your team. And it doesn't need to be something in your sector, but if you have an agreement to this is where we aspire to get to, and that doesn't need to be the whole organisation. It could be that you want to get your chief exec having more of a presence on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you're saying to your chief exec, actually, we want you to be a bit more like Louise McDonald, who's chief exec of Young Scott. Here's how she approaches her Twitter account. It'd be great if you could create similar engaging content with politicians and journalists and other people working in their sector, so that everyone is clear about what good looks like, rather than it being a really abstract thing that sits written down in a strategy. Fashion revolution, I have no idea what that is. Romy, where are you on the, do you want to tell us what fashion revolution is? Romy, do you want to, are you okay to come on the call? Do you want me to, or you can type it in the box if you want to tell us what fashion revolution, oh no, you've unmuted yourself.
Yeah, sorry, I just got a cold call from O2 after I typed it. So I missed part of it, but Fashion Revolution, they basically have a pretty large following looking at garment workers' rights.
All right, okay.
And then lots of their social media content. I'll put a link just to their Instagram. It's just really nice graphics and really well done, very clean, clear messages.
Brilliant, yeah. Yeah, and I think for me, don't always think about looking to those bigger organisations that have the big budget and all the resource, is actually sometimes looking to a smaller organisation, because sometimes they have that freedom and they're really nimble. So the example again we gave of Refugee is actually some of the bigger refugee organisations that I've worked with, so people like Scottish Refugee Council, actually with their content, they're aspiring to be like the smaller organisation Refugee. So just thinking about it, that's not always about looking up to the bigger organisation. Sometimes it's thinking about what's the smaller organisation that's nimble and able to react quickly and say the things that we wish we could say. Okay, right, we've got about 5 more minutes, so it's just, I guess we've answered lots of questions and talked about lots of topics. This is a bit of a free-for-all now, so any questions, fire away. So you can either stick your hand up and we can bring you on the video, or you can put the question in chat if you're not comfortable coming on video. So who wants to go first?
Kate's got her hand up, Ross.
Kate, do you want to unmute yourself and jump on?
Hi, yeah, hello? Can you hear me?
Hello? Yeah.
Yeah. You were talking about Zencastr. I'm trying to get people to sort of record video clips of themselves talking, sort of board members or stakeholders for our Facebook page, and not a lot of them are very technically competent. So I thought, oh, I know, I can record a Facebook, sort of FaceTime or a Zoom chat, and they could leave their message, and then I would have the video and they wouldn't have to send me anything in, and that would be easy. So I tried to do it on FaceTime earlier and WhatsApp, but my iPhone just will not record audio. So what can I do to help other people get me video content where they're not sending me videos and freaking out?
So there is an exact tool that will do that called Video Ask. So I've put the link to it. It's called Video Ask. I put the link in chat, so videoask.com. So Video Ask is built by people who built Typeform. And the way that it works is it's basically like asynchronous chat. So rather than you having a video call with someone and recording a real-time video call, you can ask someone a question, and when they get sent the link, they are then answering that question on video, and then you basically got the recording of the video. So you can use it. A lot of people use it for interviews, for example, or FAQs, or trying to get feedback on a product or a service. So let's say, for example, someone accessed a counselling service, rather than them having to fill out a form, you could send them a link and they could give you a quick bit of video feedback. The other way it's quite useful as well is if you want to capture really quick, so like 30-second video content that is, let's say, a volunteer talking about why they love volunteering for your charity.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want.
Yeah, so you can send them a link to that. They record the 30-second clip. You then have that as an embeddable clip that you can use on your site or on your social media channels, rather than you having to film them and interview them. It's like it's then putting the onus on them to answer the question. So that's a really, really nice tool for doing that.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay. Karen, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wondered, I am a one-person social media team in a charity where nobody else has any digital or social media awareness or interest particularly, so it's pretty much up to me. And within the charity I run 4 different pages, all of which have 4 different personalities. So what you were saying, I do have a different hat on each time I'm posting on each page. But one of the things is we have a monthly lucky number draw, and this is my biggest bugbear. We have a monthly lucky number draw that I am trying to grow. I want people to sign up to. So like a 200 club lottery kind of thing. Yeah. Whenever I post about that on Facebook, the reach of the post is really low. No matter how, I have tried using Canva, I have tried posting winners, but as soon as I mention this lucky number draw or anything else like that, it's almost as if, and I know people who follow the page aren't seeing it.
Yeah. Okay.
Is there a way to overcome Facebook throttling these posts?
Right. So if you could do that, you'd be the richest person in the world, and you wouldn't be here talking to me.
Just want people signed up to a draw. I don't want to be rich.
No, I know. So basically, Facebook's algorithm is going to determine what people see in their timelines. So the average person has something like, I can't remember, the figure's like staggering, like it's something like 20,000 potential pieces of content a day. So if you think about it, so Facebook's 15 years old now, and if you think over that time period, every page you've ever liked, every group you've ever joined, everyone in your network, and as they're posting every single day, if you were getting that stuff in chronological order, it would just be a whirring mess of crap. But basically what Facebook's algorithm is trying to do is determine what you as an individual are most likely to want to see. And the biggest factor is historical engagement. So if Save the Children post, and every time they post either like, share or comment on it, that algorithm's going to hazard a guess, I want more stuff from Save the Children. If there's a charity whose page I liked 3 years ago and I've never interacted with a single post, I may never ever again see a post from that charity, because the algorithm has to decide what I'm going to see based upon that. And that's where paid content comes in, so either ads or promoted posts to gain that system.
I just interrupt, but I know that people who regularly interact and follow the page and like and everything else like that, it's still not showing up. I actually...
So there's something like 100,000 weighting factors in Facebook's algorithm. So there's no, it's basically, that's why I'm saying you'd be the richest person in the world if you knew how that works. There's no way of understanding 100% how that system works, but the big factors in it are historical engagement and what people are talking about right now. So you'll see this a lot with charities. So if you're a charity who talks about something that has just hit the news and it's relevant to the work that you're doing. So let's say Alex's rare condition is in the news because a celebrity's got it and they talk about it, but there's also 40,000 people online talking about it right now, and that number's grown exponentially. Facebook's algorithm is clever enough to know that, and it'll prioritize your content massively. You'll see it hit timelines really, really quickly. The problem is if you post something, so you have 2,000 likes on a page, how good the content is can sometimes be irrelevant, and actually what is sometimes more important is thinking, how do I build the shares for that piece of content? So you could have a really compelling video, but it's not been shared any times, you're then limited to the number of likes on the page, which is where something like that, that network that I mentioned that Cancer Research had, if you had a simple network on WhatsApp of 20 people, and those 20 people committed when you put that video up, they're going to hit a share button, you hit 20 new networks. And all it takes is one person in those 20 new networks to hit a share button again, and then it snowballs into 20 new networks. And that's how you'll grow reach for your content. What you're not going to grow reach for is you put up a post, you get 2,000 likes on a page, an algorithm needs to determine how many of those 2,000 people are about to see it. That number is going to be 45 people have seen it, and that's where it ends. So you need to think about how you break out of the number of likes on the page. That's probably your biggest thing that you need to be trying to do really with Facebook. The other alternative is spend money. But the whole thing around Facebook is Facebook's system is now gamed to the point where you need to either game it yourself cleverly through the ways that you're getting people to hit that share button, or you need to spend the money to get the content in front of people. Gone are the days of putting content up on a page and then it just hits all the likes on the page. I mean, those days never really existed, but they're even more throttled now than they've ever been. Okay. Anyone else in the room got any thoughts just on that kind of, on algorithms and just some of the simple techniques that you've used to get your content in front of more people? Anyone want to share any thoughts on that? Okay, you're all just hungry and want your lunch. Right, I think we have time for one more question and we'll finish up.
Ross, there was a question from Philippa in the chat around confidentiality of service users when it comes to reviews.
Oh, okay. Philippa, do you want to jump in and share that? Are you still here, Philippa?
Yeah.
Sorry. A lot of our service users are very vulnerable families who work in social work area, children and families. The thing you were saying about reviews would be really good, but the problem is that we need to protect their confidentiality. So it would be quite hard to get them to expose themselves in that way and write something very publicly on Facebook or Google.
Yeah. So the way that I would do that is think about who is the sensible person to leave the review. So in that case, that person is not the sensible person to leave the review. So the example I gave you from Peak, what you will not see a single review from the 70 or maybe 80 now, I think, 5-star reviews on Peak's pages. There's not a single review from a young person. Trying to get a young person to go and leave a Facebook review is like trying to get them to even log into Facebook in the first place. It's going to be difficult. Getting them to go and leave a review is ridiculous. So when they're thinking about who do we want to leave reviews, and actually who is going to read that review and trust it and act on it, is actually parents. So although parents don't use the service, it's parents who are leaving the reviews, and that's their focus when they're thinking about review content. So in your case, your reviews might come from professionals who referred the person on this in the first place, or the professional who's also working in that family. So maybe a teacher or a social worker or someone in another charity who's working closely with that family. And they don't need to mention a family by name. So when we're thinking about these reviews, don't just think about beneficiaries and service users. A lot of charities, so people like Chaz, there's a couple other Scottish charities have been really good at this, is their primary driver for reviews, particularly on Facebook, is supporters. So people who've done things like run a 10K to raise money or done a bake sale. And what they use that for is someone sees that they signed up to run a 10K for Chaz, and they got a really nice run invest, and they've got loads of support to increase their giving from the fundraising team. When you read that and you think, I want to raise money for a children's health charity, and you've maybe got 3 or 4 in mind, you don't have an allegiance to one organisation, and you read a review like that, that's the thing that makes you want to go and run that 10K for Chaz rather than one of the other children's charities. So just thinking beyond necessarily the beneficiary and thinking about who that other person is that might leave the review. Okay, right, I think we're going to finish up there. So a couple of things. So Jen has put the link to the training that we've got. So on the Third Sector Lab website, you'll get the 2 sessions that we've got coming up next week. At some point, we'll have the video from this session, which will edit out the bits during the breakout room where Jen and I go. I wonder if they'll all come back. I don't know what's going to happen. So we'll edit those bits out, and then we'll make an actual succinct, sensible video out of it. I don't know, I might edit out my child coming on and then run away with scissors as well. We'll get any of these kind of links that are in the chat as well. We'll gather those up. Probably what we're going to do with a lot of these workshops is we'll email some of this stuff out, but also for each of the training pages where there's been a previous event, we'll upload the video onto that page, and we'll also put a stack of the resources in there as well. So any of the stuff like the guides to writing a policy, or some of the tools that we've mentioned, or any other kind of tips that have come from other people in the chat, we'll gather it up and put it on that single page. Right, I'm going to shut up because we're slightly over time. But thank you so much for coming along. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a nice lunch, and I'll see you all soon. I'll catch you later.